Hi everyone, and welcome back to Bitnits. I'm Marlise, and this is the December installment of my Books and Mitered Granny Square crochet project. Throughout the year, I would crochet mitered granny squares for each book that I read all throughout the year. I had a whole bunch in January and February, and then way less in the summer months. And now that it's December, I picked up my reading again, and I have a whole bunch of squares and books to talk about today. The first book that I read in December is An Island Christmas by Nancy Thayer. This one I picked up just because it was December, just because it was a Christmas-themed book, trying to get into the season a little bit. That was a mistake. I did not like this book at all. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the whole premise. It was too fakey for me. It's about a girl who is getting married back at home. She grew up in Nantucket. Her mom wants her to get married at home, have a big fancy wedding, which is not her style at all. She's sort of a hippie, kind of. She likes camping and hiking, and her fiance live, I think, in Colorado. So just a totally different world than what her mom expects for her. But to make her mother happy, she decides to go back to Nantucket to get married, and all of this drama ensues. It was supposed to be entertaining, I think. I didn't find it entertaining. I didn't really like this book at all. Goodreads has this just under 4 stars, but I'm only giving it a 1 star. I do, however, really like this granny square that I created for it. I love the sort of variegated on the borders, the last 2 rows, and then we've got the red and green sort of in the center to kind of indicate that it is a Christmas-themed book. Next up, I read Coming to Find You by Jane Corry. I really enjoyed this book a lot. This is a mystery thriller, like a murder mystery. A woman's parents were murdered, and she's kind of got to find out what happened. She's got a stepbrother that's a little bit shady. People think that she's a little bit shady. She goes back to her childhood home where shady things happened when she was younger, and she finds that the community there is very welcoming. They don't really know who she is. She makes friends, and throughout all of these friendships and throughout the course of the story, she finds out what happened to her parents. The reader finds out what happened to her parents. The writing is really well done. The characters and the descriptions are very well done. So I really did enjoy this book. So here is my mitered granny square for this one. We've got some gray around the last few rounds, dark blue, and sort of a mustard in the middle or the center. Goodreads gave this like a 3.6. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 star. Next up, Here in the Dark by Alexis Soloski. I am very upset that I even picked this book up. It was recommended through my library maybe, and so I listened to this on an audiobook. I didn't like it. Nothing about it. I didn't like the production on the audio version. I didn't like the writing. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the premise. I don't know why I even picked this book up. It's about a woman who is a writer for like operas or musicals. She does reviews and things for operas and musicals in New York City, but then something happens where she becomes part of this scheme or this production in real life. It is so confused and over the top. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I can see where the idea, if done properly, would have been amazing, but this was not done well at all. Goodreads has this at just over 3 stars, but I am giving it a 1 just because I have to rate it, or do I? I probably would give this a 0 star, but I do appreciate the fact that somebody actually sat down and wrote a book, and so I'm going to give it a 1 star. A for effort, but execution not there at all. I do like the granny square though. We've got some gray, darker gray, green, and pink in the center. Next up, Good Bad Girl by Alice Feeney. This one is a murder mystery thriller yet again. I listened to this as an audio version of the book and I really enjoyed it. It's about a woman who, again, has to solve a sort of a murder mystery that kind of surrounds her family, and there's some twists and turns. The writing's really good. The characters I felt fairly connected to, the descriptions throughout, the production of the audio version. Everything was really well done. I really like the square as well. We've got pink, sort of a purple, I don't know, kind of blue-ish gray, and then a light gray down here. Goodreads has this at about 3.5, 3.6, and I actually gave this a 4 out of 5 star. Next up, My Husband's Wife by Jane Corry. This book blew me away. I loved it. The drama surrounding it, the characters, the descriptions. A lot of people, if you look at the reviews on Goodreads, said it was way too long, but I actually felt that everything that was put into the book was needed. Now, I'm sure you could take some of it out and still get the overall gist, but the characters were so intriguing and developed that you really needed everybody's backstory to get the big picture throughout this novel. Now, I listened to this one on an audio version. It's about a couple who lives in London, and they live next door to a woman who has a young daughter, and they're from Italy, and so they barely speak English. The little girl is sort of a latchkey type kid, and eventually she really befriends the neighbors, the woman and her husband. Now, the woman is a lawyer and is defending somebody in a big trial case that kind of makes her career. So the story spans from that point way into the future, and all of these characters are interconnected in some way, and it really is fascinating to see how one incident or even one thing said 20 years earlier comes back into the future or affects them in the future in some way. So this whole premise was interesting. The characters were interesting. I found this a really quick and interesting read. So I really like this one. Goodreads has this about 3.5, and I think that's because a lot of people do not like how long the book was and how there was just so much packed into it. I am giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm really on the border of giving it a 5 out of 5, so this is probably more like a 4.5 star for me. Next up, we have Greenlights by Matthew McConaughey. This is not the sort of book that I would typically pick up. However, it had been getting such rave reviews that I said, okay, enough with the murder, mystery, thriller, Christmas type books. Let's pick up something completely different. So I picked this up. I listened to it. So it was kind of interesting to see his personality really show up as he's narrating this book. There were parts that I really enjoyed about it, and there were parts that took me a while to get into, just his style of narrating and being a biography or a story about his life and how he's lived his life. It took me a little bit to get out of sort of a fictional mindset into this kind of real life mindset. But the writing is well done. The stories are anecdotal and interesting. It's amazing to see all of these different experiences that people have, unique experiences that people have throughout their life that really shapes them into who they are today. So for this square, I used a lot of green and beiges, mainly just to match sort of the cover color scheme. Goodreads has this as an average of over 4 stars, and I'm pretty much there too. I'm giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, The Mother's Promise by Sally Hepworth. This was not a murder mystery thriller, although it read very quickly. I listened to this one again on an audio book version, I found that I was able to really get a lot done listening to books this month. I had so much to do, but I also wanted to take some time for myself and read or listen to books. So, A Mother's Promise, Sally Hepworth. The writing was great. This one kept you fairly engaged. It is a tear-jerker. It's very emotional. There's a lot of sad parts, things that pull on your heartstrings. But overall, the story has an ending of togetherness and hope and a sense that no matter what happens, humans and people are able to persevere, and especially through connections and friendships that they may make, and just the good souls out there that are out there in the world that help people who are in need. This is about a woman who has a daughter. They live together. There's no father or husband mentioned, really, at least not until we get further along in the story. The daughter has severe social anxiety, which causes panic attacks and just really struggles as she's growing up. And she's now in high school. Her mother is diagnosed with cancer, and the dynamic of how the mother wants to protect her daughter, not really telling her the full truth. But of course, eventually it all comes out, and everybody kind of has to live with what is going to happen. So again, a tearjerker, but it's very well written. Not the sort of story that Sally Hepworth typically writes that I found. So this was definitely a different style book for her. Goodreads has this an average of just over 4 stars, and I am also going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars. For the mitered granny square, I've got some grays, pinks, and blues to match the cover art. Next up, Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. Wow, what a premise. So this is about a woman who is an attorney, a lawyer in London. And one night, the book starts off this one night, it's around Halloween. And so the author purposefully indicates certain things, like there's a pumpkin in the window, it's dark, it's cool out. All these sort of fall Halloween type descriptions. Her son, who is in high school, is coming home at night. She happens to look out the window and she sees him, and he stabs somebody. And she doesn't know who this person is that he stabbed. And so they have to go to the police department, and there's all this, worry and what are we going to do kind of thing. And the son is sort of just like, well, I did it. And of course, the mother, being a lawyer, is, you can't say that, don't say anything. So she wakes up the next day, and she's asking people, like, what should we do? And nobody seems to have any idea what she's talking about. She goes to her son's room, and he's there. So she thinks, well, what happened overnight? What did I miss? So what the story is her, every time she falls asleep, she goes back in time to a moment that might help her solve sort of the mystery surrounding why her son stabbed this other person. So I found this premise fascinating. I kind of like that science fiction fantasy that is so realistically done, it's believable. So I highly recommend this book. It is rather long. I listened to this on an audio version, which again allowed me to get through stuff that I needed to do, but also listen, and I could not put it down, or I could not take my my headphones out of my ears for this book. So highly recommend it. We've got some mustards, orange, and pink for this square. Goodreads has this just under 4 stars as an average, but I am all out going 5 out of 5 stars. Highly recommend it. Next up, You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Genevieve Rose. Another, I don't know why I picked this up. This is supposed to be like a horror mystery thriller, which turned into like bad romance. I don't know. A woman from New York City or some big city goes out to Wyoming to stay at a Verbo or a kind of a bed and breakfast type thing in Wyoming. The guy that is renting out the rooms or the house stays with her, but kind of psycho, but then she falls for him. I listened to this on an audio version, and you've got one narrator who is narrating the role of the female, the woman in the story, and then a male who is narrating the point of view of the host or the guy that's renting out his rooms in this weird Wyoming town. I don't know. The whole thing was weird. Like, I think you were supposed to guess who was the bad guy. The romance was way too much for me. I did not need it, did not like it. The writing wasn't even great. No. Waste of my time. So that's book number 2 in December, kind of a waste of my time. Luckily, I was listening to it so I could tune it out if I had to. I do like the square though. We've got some greens, dark greens, forest greens, red, and sort of a grayish blue. Goodreads has this averaging over 3 stars, but I am only giving it 1 or a 0, something way down there. I did not like it. A for effort, but execution, no. 0. Did not like it. And finally, in December, I read The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf. By reading, I mean I listened to this. So this one was another one that was recommended through my library, I think. It is a thriller mystery. There's some horror, murder in there. It's about a woman who is a little bit estranged from her young son and her ex-husband, and she's going out in the middle of nowhere in a snowstorm. I don't know if this is Colorado or if it's out east. I don't know. It's somewhere where it's cold and sort of remote, and there's a big snowstorm, and so nobody can get around. So she's going out to walk her dog or get some wood for the fireplace, and she sees this little boy buried in the snow. So she grabs him, she takes him back to where she's staying, warms him up. All of a sudden the mother is there. I'm sort of paraphrasing here, but the mother turns up. There's this whole backstory of what happened. It's okay. It was an okay read. Like, it didn't super hold my attention, but it wasn't like I hated it. So it was just okay for me. I do like the square. We've got some dark blues, we've got some yellows, and some gray in the center. Goodreads has this at 4 stars as an average, but I'm only going to give it 2. I just wasn't super invested in it. It's all right. It wasn't great for me. So here are all of my December mitered granny squares for all of the books that I read in December. I will have a list down below in the description box if you're interested in exactly the book title and the author. Maybe you want to pick up a book or 2 that I read. Now I just have to figure out what to do with all of these granny squares, but that's for another video. So until next time, everyone, happy reading, happy crocheting. I'll see you next time. Bye.